One thing that I don't like about Ubuntu is that it basically becomes a kumbaya, come and hold hands with your enemy type of thing. And most people who preach Ubuntu are either married to white people, or they want to marry white people, or they are a child of a white person, and they're trying to find some way to shroud, you know, their anti-black mentality in something that seems partially indigenous, and they select Ubuntu to do so. A conversation with someone who was married to a white man, and she started talking about, oh, what about all of the innocent white people, and we need to practice Ubuntu with white people and so forth. And I was like, you know, I can tell that you haven't recovered from being married to a white man. Really, if you can share bodily fluids with your enemy, then there's nothing that you won't do. Colonization of the spiritual realm, in the sense that once you can colonize a people's tastes and desires, there's a proverb that says, "Okonfo jimian in the jimi," and it translates to, if there's a foolish diviner, then the deity associated with that diviner is also going to behave in foolish ways. I can translate it that way. Let's say you have someone who's a diviner and that person becomes hooked on cigarette. Well, the next thing you know, the Obosom is asking for a cigarette. Now, before cigarettes were brought to the country, the Obosom never asked for cigarettes because it doesn't even exist. What this is a genetic terrorist. You understand? That's the bedroom colonizer. And you find it that anytime you have someone who is too much about something black that may actually liberate black people, the bedroom terrorists, they sick the bedroom terrorists on them to, tone them down. If you have coffee that's, black, is too strong, it keeps you up. But what they want to do is that they want to integrate cream into the coffee. What used to keep you up now puts you to sleep, you understand? And that's what you have. And a lot of these so-called liberation leaders, from Jomo Kenyatta to Kwame Nkrumah to marry, an Arab, woman. Now, if it came down to, all right, who's going to do something in the interest of black people? Well, now they're thinking about, well, what about my white wife? You understand? They've been toned down from whatever may have been in the interest of black people, and now they're thinking about, well, what about the interests of my, white wife? Here, people will hold up their, so-called white name as, oh, this is a badge of honor, when really it's a badge of shame. There's nothing more shameful than to have a name of a dog who their mentality is such that it is trained to enrich our enemies. How did everyone get to the point where wearing something that's made by your own people is something that's even noteworthy or remarkable or something like this? Meanwhile, it's normal to be wearing jeans and slacks and shoes and trousers, and that's not made by your own people. No one will say anything, to the point where if you're wearing anything made by black people, people will think you must be foreign. And if you're wearing something made by non-black people, then people, oh, this is a real Ghanaian. This is just normal Ghanaian. Anytime you go to a traditional ruler, you're supposed to bring 2, bottles of schnapps. But it brings up, so this is Dutch, Holland and so forth. But it comes to, well, what were they asking for before the Dutch came? If you're saying that before I can even contact my own ancestors, I need to go through the Dutch, right?
That's not right.
Exactly.
Hello guys, and welcome back again to another amazing episode. And as you guys already know, this is the diaspora transition episode where we have dialogue with diasporans who decided to relocate to the continent here in Ghana. Today we do have here someone very special, very knowledgeable. He goes by the name Obenfo Obadele Kambon, and I've seen him everywhere. I've been following him for over 6 years now, listening to his teachings, and I find it very fascinating. So today I'm privileged to be invited to his home to have a dialogue with him, ask him about his journey, why he even decided to embark on the journey to Ghana. So without further ado, Obenfo, welcome on the show.
Madam, thank you very much for having me.
I've seen you out there. We met in person a while ago, about a year or two. I've seen what you've been doing. People are watching you for the first time. They might not know who you are. I know who you are. I've seen your work. Please briefly introduce yourself to the people watching you for the first time. Okay.
So about me, I'm Obenfo Obadele Kambon. Obenfo translates to professor, and I prefer Obenfo because one is in our own languages. Akan specifically. And, it's a term that connotates, it has a connotation of someone who's very skilled at something. It comes from the root being, which is to be well cooked. So the idea is like, let's say you have spinach or something. When you first put it into the pot, it's not well cooked. But the longer it stays in, it starts to bing, which is to be well cooked. So the idea is someone who's skilled, so forth. But it comes into English just as, the word professor. So I'm a professor at the University of Ghana, associate professor at the Institute of African Studies. I'm also the founder of ABIBITUMI, and you're here at ABIBITUMI headquarters, where everything runs on solar. We have our own water catchment system. A lot of the things, we have our own biogas digester in the back, composter. So a lot of the things that people talk about in terms of sustainability and things along those lines, we're actually, you know, providing a living model. You know, it's one thing to get on stage and say, yeah, we need to do for self. But, you know, for me, I'd prefer to do for self before I say anything about it to anyone else. And in that, you know, you're leading by example. I remember, and, you know, I'm still doing the introduction, but this is a sidebar. I read a book called Nkrumah Yeminyanya, and it translated to Wrath of the Ancestors. It was written in Isixhosa, I believe it was. Either Isixhosa or Isizulu, I think it was Isixhosa. But in it, there was a young person who was installed. He had gone off to get so-called education. He came back, and he wasn't really meshing with the culture, so he went to another traditional ruler. This is the Mpondomise people. And he went to another traditional ruler, and he said, well, you know, the way these people herd cattle, all the cattle herders, they run in back and then they, you know, drive the cattle forward. He said these other people, they'll run in front and then they'll whistle and then the cattle know. And he basically said, you can't get a herder from the people who go in front and then put him in the, you know, back, because he won't know what to do. And then vice versa, you can't take the cattle from those who are in the back and then give them a front herder, because they'll be whistling, they'll get all the way to the mountain and the cows will be way back, they won't know what to do. So, you know, it's a lesson in terms of leadership, but all that's a sidebar. I'm also a husband to Kala Kambon, a father to 5 children. My eldest, Ama Onyonko Pombo Ajagbe Aladia, Sizi Dia Silwa Mpolo Nunungo Esanki Be Kambon. My second, Kwayako Ghana Ba Abibifa Hundia Ba, Olominira, Ojua Jaya, Yodola Shoinka Tukula Kamal Kambon. My third born, Akosia Sonkwan Abaye, okay, Alara Lai Wala Akambi, Kimpwanzo Kokinyakisa Kambon. My fourth born, Efia Hinkai, Oyakole Oyasanya, and Kisi Akanda, Mandla Zinzele Mekatit Committee Kambon. And then my youngest is Nana Yao Bekwe, Abisogun, Rogundade, Met Kemet, Ameni, Ekundayo, Fukiao Kambon. So those are my 5
names.
children. Yeah. What they would call Pan-African names. Yeah. I actually have an article on that so people can check it out, you know, on the site. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. I'm a son to Nana Kamal Kambon, who recently passed away. We'll talk a bit about the conference we have coming up that's dedicated to him. And then Okunini Ba, that's Dr. Mawia Kambon, a psychologist, former president of the Association of Black Psychologists. So we can talk more about, you know, there. But I feel like when you're giving an introduction, it's always best to show how you relate in context. What I find is you have a lot of people who are, you know, speakers, and they're, you know, Pan-Africanists, or they're, you know, whatever they are. And you just see them. It's like, well, where's their wife? Where's the husband? Where's the children? Where's the parents? They just come out and they say, okay, I'm a Pan-Africanist, and you just accept them at face value. But you may find out, you know, the person has a white husband or a white wife, or it's like, you know, what's going on. Yeah. So it's good to know, you know, who the person comes from in terms of lineage, in terms of descent, how they relate, how they are relative, and how they're relevant, you know.
I like that.
So yeah.
I like that. Your outfit is amazing. I see you have, this is the pure African outfit. Why, and I heard online you said that you never wear any outfit made by a white person. Yeah. Can we speak on that a little bit?
Okay, yeah. I think you saw I never knew. We were actually in a similar setup here at the ABIBITUMI headquarters there. But yeah, for that one, you know, essentially my mother, she brought me here to Ghana back in 1998. And I was part of the Sankofa journey. For those who are interested, you can check out sankofajourney.com, SANKOFA JOURNEY.com. And it was very life-changing, life-transforming. As you can see where I am right now, it was because my mother brought me here. You know, so that was for 2 weeks. We came again in 1999. And this year actually marks the 26th anniversary of the Sankofa journey. And the ABIBITUMI conference is part of the Sankofa journey. But yeah, so when I came in 99 and then going into 2000, I made a decision that every single day of my life I would wear clothing made by black people. And it was very much consistent with how I grew up, because for us, we would always go to like the black grocery store. We'll drive past 10 grocery stores to go to the black grocery store. We'll drive past 10 gas stations, or petrol stations as they would say here, to go to the one that's owned by black people. Like, that's just always our orientation. You know, you hear a lot about in other communities, you know, the dollar will bounce around 15 times or 20 times or 10 times or so forth, but the black community doesn't bounce once. My father used to say that we do money laundering, So money laundering is like we get the money from them, and then as soon as we get it, we go and put it back, there. So they're just laundering it through black hands for one time, and then we give it right back. And people say the same thing. If reparations ever came, then the next thing, the white people will have it back because they'll get it back in the Mercedes Benz that you're going to drive, and the polo shirts and all these, other, shiny trash. And, it's interesting that if you look at during the anti-black war of chattelization, what people call the so-called slave trade, that, they were able to use things like Italian beads and, mirrors and iron bars and, rum and, just basically trash, coming from, their side, tin plates and things like that. But they've basically upgraded those things, and now it's iPhones and, Teslas and, you name it. So all of those things are what I refer to as just shiny trash that's designed, for multiple things, but the main thing is to prevent us from actually building industry and capacity. I remember some years ago at the Institute of African Studies, I used to coordinate a film series. I stopped coordinating because they said that a film that we showed on Nana France Fanon may have, what they say, it may have gotten on the nerves of a white woman. A white woman may have been offended by that documentary and, the discussion that followed. So that's a sidebar. But, essentially, as we were going into the film series, we were showing films basically on that same subject about, self-sufficiency, about doing for self and all of those types of things. So, it becomes very relevant, in this day and age, that if we're actually interested in, having liberation as black people, like, well, what does that actually look like? Well, it definitely doesn't look like, going to, support others. So in the film I was referring to, it's called The Great African Scandal. And it went into, in the 1980s, early 1980s, some will remember in Ghana, the term Rawlings chain, right? And what the United Snakes of a Murderer, did is that they decided that they were going to have heavily subsidized white rice. Now, before that, we had an independent rice industry, which the north of Ghana was known for, and that's a specific strain of rice called Oriza glaberrima. But what they, and that's, the red rice, the brown rice, this type. But they decided to bring in this heavily subsidized white rice. And what it did is, well, two things. One, it created tastes and desires for what it is ultimately, this bleached, denatured, toxic substance that masquerades as rice. And the other thing it did is it collapsed the indigenous rice industry, so that once they did that, now even if you wanted to go back to your own rice, people don't even know how to plant it anymore, to any degree of capacity as they had before, So anytime they're coming in with gifts, we have to be very, careful of, those who come into our house bearing gifts, because they know what they're going to get out of what they're bringing. One, they're going to create certain tastes and desires that you now think that you can't live without. And it's interesting that, people talk about jollof rice, that jollof is actually the empire. So when they talk about the Jollof Empire, those are Wolof speakers in what's now modern day Senegal, Gambia area. And, from that, it's the indigenous food, so they call it chebujin. So this is the national dish of Senegal. Now, to say that, they have the Jollof wars, so Ghana and Nigeria is talking about, who makes the best Jollof rice. It would be like, who makes the best Fanti Kinke? Yeah. Because when you say Jollof, you're actually mentioning the people who the rice belongs to. It would be like, oh, I think the areas make better Fanti Kinke. Or like saying, oh, I think the Gaba make better Ga Kinke. It's like the name itself will tell you. So there they eat it with their hands because they know it's an indigenous food. But here we've been so far removed from our own indigenous food that we think foods that are foreign are indigenous, and we think foods that are indigenous are foreign. Because I remember one time I was at a funeral and I was asking about beans and plantain. And the beans are one of the first domesticated crops, what they call black-eyed peas. One of the first domesticated crops, in the history of man, but, definitely in what they now refer to as West Africa. So it's completely indigenous. And I'm asking about beans. But meanwhile, the people are standing in a line and they're standing for fufu. Now, the mode of preparation of fufu is indigenous, but the components of fufu are foreign. So if
Like
you look
what?
at cassava, that's coming from Central America as brought by the Portuguese, right?
So cassava is not African.
It's not indigenous to the continent at all, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, you should actually look into it. Also, plantain is coming from southeastern Nigeria. Southeastern, I'm thinking Nigeria, southeastern Asia, right? So if you go to places where it actually comes from, you'll find that they have all types of dishes that they do with it, you know, fried, cooked, you know, so forth. It's a staple for them. The same thing for like maize, right? So that also comes from, you know, Central America. So you have
Maize is also not indigenous.
it's also not indigenous. So if you come to the south of Ghana, all the things that people think are indigenous are foreign. So if you look at dokono, they used to make it with millet and sorghum. Those are indigenous ingredients. But as soon as you start making it with corn, you know, maize as they call it, then that's now a non-indigenous thing. They're just using an indigenous idea of fermentation in the preparation in order to do it. But same thing like TZ, people think about maize. But again, maize is not indigenous. You have to go to the Aztecs, you know, to all those types of people where they still have the corn flour tortillas and all of those things. It's indigenous to there. So to really even get an idea of the foods that are our own, you actually have to go to the north because that's where they still have the sorghum that they're, you know, brewing the dan or pito. Using that. That's where they still have the millet. I remember I went to the Dogon festival in Mali like a good 20 years ago, and that's what they're doing. The same thing they do with fufu. They'll pound the millet, right, and then they'll make it so you're eating it with baobab leaf sauce. I remember one time, so there's a baobab tree that grows outside of African Studies at the University of Ghana, and I remember one of my students who's, you know, from Ghana, I was eating the baobab fruit, and he was like, "Oh, you can eat this? Is this food? I didn't even know it's food." So the things that we used to eat, you know, people don't even know that it's food. And then the foods that are entirely foreign, people think, you know, we've had this forever. This is our indigenous thing. So, you know, it's very profound in the sense that if you're coming with the idea that you are what you eat, that literally we're even at a genetic level different from our ancestors, in the sense that we're made out of all of these foreign foods now, to the point that we don't even recognize indigenous foods as being foods, and we take all of these foreign foods as, you know, time immemorial. It's not time immemorial. We actually know the dates that the Portuguese brought these, you know, here. We know the dates that the Dutch brought, you know, so on and forth.
Interesting. So what were we eating before that time?
So that's what I was mentioning. So sorghum was one of the main, you know, crops. Millet was one of the main crops. Yam is indigenous. And even if you really examine the language will tell you what's indigenous and what's foreign in many cases. So for example, if you have, for example, abe, we're right next to abe. When you say abrobe, you're saying a foreign version of abe. That's the word for pineapple.
I see.
And, you know, you can find it in places like Brazil. That's where, you know, the Portuguese, people know Brazil was a Portuguese territory. That's where they actually brought it to another territory that they had at Anamansa, which they, you know, now named Elmina, and people still use that term. You have other examples, like you will have efre, which, you know, is referring to like a melon, right? So when they'll say bofre, which is actually growing right here, they're saying a foreign version of a melon, right? So, you know, anything that you see, a bro, right? Anything that you see that has that bro inside of it or bro inside of it is telling you this is a foreign version, that which is beyond the horizon.
Obro, there's also obroni, right?
Right.
So it's
yeah, so that's where it comes from. So if you have obroni or abrofo as the plural, then it's letting you know that this is someone who is foreign, not indigenous to ABIBITUMI, the land of black people, where someone who's indigenous is called Obibini, literally a black person, but someone who's not indigenous is called a foreigner. So the word Obroni, the word Abrofo. Now in recent times there's an alternate etymology, which I like, but I don't think is accurate. Where they say it's coming from Abrofo, right? Which is Abrofo would actually be the word for a wicked person. But, you know, I think that it fits. So even if it's a reverse etymology, okay, let's let the reverse etymology. Like, but, you know, the reason why, you know, it doesn't really hold water is that you have other things that have nothing to do with wickedness. So like, for example, if I say abrobe, if I say, you know, bofre, if I say, you know, there are several examples like this where even the name, it will tell you that it's foreign. There are other things that are foreign that the name doesn't tell you. So you say banche,
okay.
like there's no bro inside of it, but
so
we know it's foreign.
It's not. Okay.
Yeah, so that's an example where the name doesn't tell you that it's foreign. But like yams, those are indigenous.
Okay.
So odie would be the word for yam. So you say bordie, you're saying a foreign version of odie, right? So the plantain is also not indigenous
I see.
to the continent, you know. So these are some of the things that if we really thought deeply about our language, we would actually be told directly,
answers.
this is foreign and this is not foreign in many cases.
I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. You're very knowledgeable. I'm learning a lot.
Well, you know, I do research for a living. I'm paid by the people of Ghana to do research, so I should be doing, you know, my research. And you know, this is research that is actually empowering, because once you actually know what belongs to you, you know what's your own. Now you can actually support it, whether that's in the case of food. You asked about the clothes, so again, it just makes sense that, you know, we should support our own. And you know, I always make the case that if just in that area, I have an article I'm working on that deals with other areas too, and it deals with colonization of the spiritual realm, in the sense that once you can colonize a people's tastes and desires, there's a proverb that says, "Okonfo jimian and bosomoso jimi," and it translates to, if there's a foolish diviner, then the deity associated with that diviner is also going to behave in foolish ways. I can translate it that way. And essentially what it refers to is, let's say you have someone who's a diviner and that person becomes hooked on cigarettes. Well, the next thing you know, the Obosom is asking for cigarettes. Now, before cigarettes were brought to the country, the Obosom never asked for cigarettes because it doesn't even exist in the reality. They would burn frankincense, right? Eshe. They would, you know, have indigenous things, like even from the palm tree, the Gan people will use, you know, this as growing there. So, you know, it's something that's indigenous, where the things that you're using are, you know, elevated to a sacred level. Like, in order to even do our rituals, we need this thing that's indigenous to us because it's sacred. But now, you know, you'll no longer respect it when we don't need that for any rituals. We need the cigarettes now. You'll see the Obosom who's there smoking cigars and cigarettes. And it's, you know, the taste and the desire has been implanted into the people. And we know that the Obosom didn't have a taste for it, you know, before the Portuguese came.
Wow.
Right? So what did it come from 1481? What were we doing before that? Another example is in the schnapps. Anytime you go to a traditional ruler, you're supposed to bring 2, you know, bottles of schnapps. But it brings up, so this is Dutch, you know, Holland and so forth. But it comes to, well, what were they asking for before the Dutch came?
Snaps,
If you're saying that before I can even contact my own ancestors, I need to go through the Dutch, right?
That's not right.
Exactly. So there's a quote by Nana Yosef Ben Yakin, and he says, religion is the deification of a culture, right? So basically, you take what you do in your own culture, and you say that what we do in our culture is sacred. And a good example of that, you know, like all throughout Ghana, there are rivers that flow everywhere. Everywhere. You got, you know, Pra, you have, you know, you have Bosom Tree, you have, you know, all of the Frau. All of these are rivers that cross. But in a place that doesn't have any rivers, they have to be very conservative with their water. That's their culture, is to be very conservative with water. So they'll just do like a little ablution, right? If they want to go pray, they just get a little water on their fingertips, a little water. That's their culture. They come from a desert culture. They don't have water in abundance, but now they can even convince people who have water all around them to behave as though they're in a desert. You understand? That's where you see that their religion has become the deification of a waterless culture.
Lack mentality.
Exactly. So, you know, that now becomes, even though you have water, you can literally jump in the into the river before you go and pray. You have water in abundance. You're going to behave because they've told you that their culture is now
and they don't
sacred.
Look back and question.
And no one questions it, because, you know, you have to speak their language. You have to behave the way that they behave. You have to imbibe their foods. You have to go to their country where they get all the money from the tourism industry at least once in your life. And it becomes a social status symbol. Like, literally, there's no form of deception that's deeper than, you know, what you find in that, you know, reality, if you want to call it that. But really, it's a, you know, falsification of reality.
Who owns that merchandise, the Islamic merchandise?
Yeah, so these are the Arabs. So if you go to Saudi Arabia, right, this is where they're actually able to promote their culture. And there's a quote by Nana Wade Nobles, Dr. Wade Nobles, where he says that power is the ability to define reality and have others respond to that definition as if it were their own. So here you have Arabs who have defined reality, that to be holy, sacred, sanctified, whatever you want to be, you need to behave in this way. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter that your rivers are sacred. You have to behave as though you don't have any rivers around. And now you start to respond to their definition as though it were your own definition, when it actually makes absolutely no sense for you in a land of abundance. We're in the rainy season right now. You can just hold your hand out and you can bathe anytime, you see. But, that's, that. So, coming back to the schnapps, right? Look at how many, millions, if not billions, we've sent to, the Dutch, right?
Just to buy schnapps to talk to our ancestors.
To talk to our ancestors. Now, before that, you would have the palm wine tapper, for example, or you would have, the pure water, coming from the closest river. But now, some that would have enriched your own people by going to the palm wine tapper, all of those billions over the course of a century plus are now going to the Dutch. And what are the Dutch doing? Well, the Dutch are paving their roads. They're building skyscrapers. They're doing all the things that Dutch are doing. And meanwhile, we have, roads that are unpaved, and we've literally given them a grant. We've given them a loan. We've given them aid because of the taste and the desire. And now the Obosom, the deity the divinity will say, I want schnapps. And I want the one in the clear box.
Corrupted, but our deities are also...
So it's a colonization, not just of your physical reality, it's a colonization of the spiritual realm itself. So now the Obosom will say, I want the one in the clear one, the foreign one that, so it specifies, I want the one that enriches the enemies who've been raping, enslaving, colonizing, lobotomizing, sodomizing, lynching. I want the one that's going to enrich them. Now, why does that happen? Because the people have been colonized, and now all of the deity is very much like, if you look at a corporation, it's incorporated, coming from core, talking about the body, right? It means here's something that doesn't exist, but we're going to come together as people, and we're going to deal with it as though it exists. So if you look at a corporation like Apple or like Microsoft, there's no place where, you can say, oh, here's Apple Corporation, let me go and touch Apple Corporation. You can go to the building, you can go to the employees, those things exist, but this thing is just an idea. So this entity is really...
The people make it an idea and make
exactly. And then they give energy to the idea, and the more energy they give to that idea, the stronger Apple is as a $1 trillion company.
So the power lies there.
Exactly, and the Obosom is the same way in the sense that the more energy we give, whether it's because we need to fight a war, whether it's because we need to do trade, whether it's because we need to have fertility, whatever it is, the more energy, when we extract that energy and then we redirect it to, for example, the imaginary white boy on a stick, now the more energy that imaginary white boy gets, to now you'll have churches popping up, you'll have, this, you'll have the robes, you'll have people acting in very unnatural ways, but it's because the people are the ones who gave it the energy. If we didn't give it energy, it would just waste away and die. However, we continue to give it energy, and that's how it's able to thrive on the energy that we give. And like literally, again, to look at the imaginary white boy on a stick,
which is the so-called Jesus Christ.
Yeah, the imaginary white boy. If you were looking at, here is somebody who is, let's say, a preacher or a pastor or a reverend, whatever they are, the people will give that person money, 10% of their salary or whatever they'll give, and then that person will go and build a huge cathedral in the midst of shacks that are made out of plywood and cardboard and whatever. And then the person will say, oh, it's because of this imaginary white boy that I was able to build this huge structure. And literally, no, it's from all of the energy, the time, the energy, the resources, the money, and the spirit that the people directed in your direction that you were able to do it. But you're not thanking the black people who actually are the ones who are responsible. You're saying it's because of the imaginary white boy who did it. But again, all of this goes into the falsification of reality. So that's another one. Another example that I gave was shire. So that's what they call kaolin powder, right? Now, this is something that actually it has absorbent properties. So if you're sick, if you have like stomach poisoning, you can ingest this, and now the poisons and so the toxins will actually absorb. It will bind to it, and then it's excreted in that process. So here's something that actually brings about life, but that one too is now replaced by baby powder. Now, for those who aren't aware, Johnson & Johnson just had to settle over $1 billion lawsuit because of the carcinogenic, that means cancer-causing properties that are there in this baby powder that has things like asbestos in it and so forth. But they don't stop selling it. They just bring it here because they know we don't know anything. So here you had something that brought about life before in the form of the shire, and now it's replaced by something that brings about death in the form of the baby powder. So in all of those cases, you have the frankincense. There are studies that talk about the psychological, it's called boswellia, the psychological impact that it has in terms of the soothing and so forth. that's something that brought about life, and you replace it with the cigars and cigarettes as a smoke that's going to do what? Cause lung cancer, right? Here you had, the palm wine, where, people talk about the gut microbiome in the sense of this is like a second brain, to that point. So the fermentation is actually very good in terms of introducing good bacteria into the gut and so forth. And the fermentation process of palm wine, for example, Pito, for example, or indigenous drinks, they all actually help, this gut microbiome in the fermentation. So here you have something else that brought about life, and it's replaced by the schnapps, by the gin, by the whiskey, by the rum, all of those things that bring about death in terms of liver failure, in terms of kidney damage, in terms of all of these things. So again, you've replaced something that brought about life with something that brings about death. So I can go through other examples, but those were, 3 examples that I gave in the presentation. For those who are interested, they can check out ABIBITUMI. I have quite a few presentations there.
I like that.
But yeah, so as we're going into, all right, why am I wearing my clothes? All of that was a circuitous route to get back to here, because this is something that brings about life, right? And every time that we give our money to them to wear their t-shirts, to wear their jeans, to wear their shoes, to wear all of their things, what are we doing? But we're actually financing our enemies. And not only are we doing so on the physical plane, it's actually even colonizing the spiritual realm, because now the Obosom is saying, I want white calico cloth as an offering. Well, where is that being imported from? Or the Obosom,
China, Europe.
You see, you understand? So these are some of the things that we can keep in mind, is that if we actually are about what we say that we're about, then it will show up in our behavior. And an example of that is, at the ABIBITUMI conference, is that we're actually presenting models. So for those who are interested, you can go to conference.abibitumi.com. I'll spell ABIBITUMI, that translates to Black Power in Chi, ABIBITUMI. So, at the ABIBITUMI conference, we have those who are presenting on the actual models. So everything you hear me talk about is like, people will say, oh, well, he's unique. No, when you come to the ABIBITUMI conference, you'll find others who are working in agriculture. You have others who are, dealing with block making machines. You have others who are dealing with 3D printing. So everybody is doing something, and we're having a massive meeting of the minds for the best practices in ABIBITUMI Black Power and ABIBIFAHODIE Black Liberation. So
where is it going to happen?
It's going to happen right here at ABIBITUMI headquarters here in Ekwapim Mampong. So I'd definitely like to invite your viewers again. Go to conference.abibitumi.com, and there you can be a participant, you can be a vendor, you can be a sponsor, you can be a performing artist, a visual artist. We're going to have an art exhibition. We're going to have an art auction. We have an award ceremony. We have a concert. Last year we had, so many Black Powerful artists present. We had Pure Khan who headlined, Black Powerful young artists. Black Rasta, came through. Black Santino, a DJ who's been out there doing his thing for decades. So many. If I start listing them, someone will say you miss me. But we had amazing artists. We had those who are doing traditional art, the kora players. That's King Soma, who also did the conference bags. So it's going to be very, very Black Powerful. Last year we had Nkwadria, that's my daughter's catering service, who catered the entire event for hundreds of people.
Amazing.
So yeah, it's going to be very, very powerful, and you'll get a lot out of it.
What date is it?
It's going to be September 6th to the 8th, and this year is dedicated to the memory of Nana Kambon. That's my father. We'll do a statue unveiling. It will be unveiled right behind here. We have a documentary we're doing for him. So if you check out abibitumi.com/quiet warrior, abibitumi.com/quiet warrior, there are opportunities for people to become producers, get their names in the credits, get invites to the launch, all those things. And it's really being a part of history, because he was a groundbreaking, scholar and solutionary. More than scholar, he actually preferred to use the term solutionary, because he's someone who's interested in the solution to the #1 problem on the planet Earth. I
like it. Now, you mentioned your father. Let's just go back to your story. Even your upbringing. Where did you grow up in the U.S. and how was your upbringing like? What were your parents like? Who gave you this, eye-opening knowledge? Let's go back to the beginning of it. And even you coming to Ghana, choosing Ghana specifically to come and do what you're doing. Yeah.
So in terms of the Ghana specifically, that comes from my mother. She saw an advert in a newspaper that was mentioning a chartered flight to Africa. That's how it was framed. And she wasn't even sure of where in Africa they were coming, but she said, I'm coming. So she and a friend, they booked their seats, and they came, this is 1972. So I was born in 1979, so my parents were on the path long before I was even an inkling. And interestingly enough, before I was born again, so my parents were married, and they decided that rather than exchange wedding rings, which are, you know, blood diamonds for the most part, that they decided they were going to exchange names that they felt really encapsulated the character of each other, and then the character that they wanted the family to exhibit. So, you know, basically my mother, she came in 72. She started coming again in the 90s. And, you know, she came independently a few times. My parents, they went to Kenya and Kemet, what is, I call it occupied Kemet, what they now call Egypt. And, you know, so they always had this connection. And, you know, we were born with our names. It's interesting that, you know, I have people who will ask me, okay, well, when did you change your name? I actually have an article on this, because what they don't know is that many of us in the diaspora have never had any white names whatsoever, right? Meanwhile, people in the so-called diaspora don't know that many on the continent have never had indigenous names whatsoever. So, you know, someone just came and said, oh, my name is Perry Planch. It's like, well, what is that? Or Harry Sawyer. It's like, what is that? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, that was my name, and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, you have someone like myself, Obadele Kambon. I've never had any white name. So people ask you, well, what's your Christian name? What's your English name? I say, I've never had one. And it's like mind-blowing to them. And what it tells me is that we haven't had very good dialogues across the ocean, because people don't know that, you know, back in the 60s, people said, we're not white people, why do we have white names? We're still waiting for that, you know, realization to happen in many places, because here people will hold up their, you know, so-called white name as, oh, this is a badge of honor, when really it's a badge of shame. You know, there's nothing more shameful than to have a name of a dog. Now, when I say this, it's because, like, if you go to the U.S. right now, people will name their dogs names like, you know, Garfield or John or this or that, or, you know, Snoopy. Like, you'll have these names, and the same names that we'll say, like, my name is Happy, right? I've met people who name, like, people will name their cat Happy, because out of all the names they have, like, they have nothing but white names to select from. So the names that they're going to give their dogs are going to be the same names that they are giving here. And, you know, it's almost funny, especially, you know, during times of enslavement, like they would do it as a joke, where they're going to name someone the name of some type of Greek person, or some type of, you know, Roman person, or someone, you know, so forth. So the exact same names that we think are so, you know, high and mighty. I mentioned this to a colleague. His name was Clement. And I mentioned that these are dog names, and he thought it was like just an insult. I actually Googled dog name Clement, and it showed, you know, the rank in popularity, how those dogs behave who have that name. And so it was like mind-blowing to him. He's thinking like, this is the, this is, you know.
He was proud of it.
Yeah, whatever he thought about it. He actually said he was proud of that name. I was like, you share a name with a dog. I'm yet to meet a dog named Kwame. It's a human being name. I'm yet to meet a dog named Kofi. It's a pure human being name. But, you know, we take the same names that they'll name their dogs and cats and fish and, you know, things along those lines. So, you know, these are some of the things that, you know, when we become serious about, you know, black power and black liberation, we'll no longer settle for having the name of a dog or the name of a cat or to have, you know, their cancer-causing, you know, baby powders and, you know, all these types of things. And that's when, you know, I feel like it's real, when we actually live what we say that we're about. So for me, what makes me happy is to actually be about what I say that I'm about, right? I'm not happy by, you know, cakes and ice cream and balloons and, you know, whatever, champagne. Like, those things don't make me happy. What literally makes me happy and satisfied is that I said that I'm about this thing, and I actually am demonstrating being about that.
I like that. What year did you have your first trip to Ghana?
So I first came to Ghana in 1998, and that was also the first Sankofa journey. I mentioned that my mother, you know, brought a group here, and it was mainly like college students and young people in the, you know, in North Carolina, Raleigh-Durham area, Greensboro, and so forth. So, you know, again, that was my first time coming, and at the time, you know, I was young, you know, I really didn't even have a sense of what everything was all about. So now I teach Chi at the university level, but at the time I didn't even know there was anything called Chi in the world. You understand? You know, we knew about Kiswahili, we knew about other things, but it was coming here that really showed me, here's a place where it's all black people. And here are foods that are eaten by black people. These are pilots of the, plane that we're flying in
So
on.
your research and the knowledge you've been able to accumulate started when you came to Ghana?
No.
No. I mean, for the history part of...
No, no. So I remember even in elementary school, they had a test on Black history, and I had the highest score in the entire school. You understand?
Yeah.
So like the foundation was there from, young. We used to celebrate Kwanzaa, which had what was called the Nguzo Saba in Kiswahili. So we grew up with ideas of umoja, unity, kujichagulia, self-determination.
Ubuntu.
Well, Ubuntu isn't one of the Nguzo Saba, but it's a concept that comes from the Amarosa, which is also, an indigenous, value and so forth and so on. One thing that I don't like about Ubuntu is that it basically becomes a kumbaya, come and hold hands with your enemy type of thing. And most people who preach Ubuntu are either married to white people, or they want to marry white people, or they are a child of a white person, and they're trying to find some way to shroud, their anti-black mentality in something that seems partially indigenous, and they select Ubuntu to do so. So yeah, I have a major problem. And actually, I had a conversation with someone who was married to a white man, and she started talking about, oh, what about all of the innocent white people, and we need to practice Ubuntu with white people and so forth. And I was like, I can tell that you haven't recovered from being married to a white man. And really, if you can share bodily fluids with your enemy, then there's nothing that you won't do.
Let's speak more on this. You make mention, like you mention your enemy so comfortably, and then you directly say these white folks are enemies.
Yes.
Elaborate on that more. Like, why are they our enemies? I'm very curious because I've met a young man who said he's in love with a white woman, and his white woman is also Pan-African because that's
Exhibit A.
She was colonized.
They're your enemy,
right? So she was like, "Oh, my wife is colonized. They didn't colonize nobody, right? So why does she have to, why don't I have to marry her or whatever? If we're in love, and spiritually we are the same people anyways. Physically we have different body, but spiritually we are just one soul, whatever."
Yeah, he sounds like a typical victim of bedroom colonialism. She herself is a colonizer of his body. I hope you
elaborate on that.
Very good. So if you look at the word for enemy and chi, that's otamfo.
Otamfo.
It comes from the root tang, which is to hate. And there's a very good quote by Baba Omowale, also known as Malcolm X, where he goes into who taught you to hate the texture of your hair. You can see this even in his selection of love, right? Who taught you to hate? Because if he loved himself, he would love what looks like him. He would love the image of his mother. But because he's been taught to hate the image of his mother, when he looks in the mirror, he's been taught to hate that. Now he picks the exact opposite, so-called picks it, but it's really manipulation. We can go into manipulation as power as well, because the images that he's seen in movies, on TV screens, where they have their fur flowing in the air with the wind and so forth, all of that is part of what culminated in the bedroom colonialism and the self-hatred. But let me come back to Baba Omowale. So it says, who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? So much so that you bleach, to look like them. Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? You understand? And this is really where you can find the otamfo, that the ones who've actually taught the hatred are the exact same ones who we so-called, are taught to love now. And, what this is a genetic terrorist. You understand? That's the bedroom colonizer. And you find it that anytime you have someone who is too much about something black that may actually liberate black people, the bedroom terrorists, they sick the bedroom terrorists on them to, tone them down. Again, Baba Omowale, he gave the example of coffee. If you have coffee that's, black is too strong, it keeps you up. But what they want to do is that they want to integrate cream into the coffee. What used to keep you up now puts you to sleep, you understand? And that's what you have. And a lot of these so-called liberation leaders, from Jomo Kenyatta to Kwame Nkrumah to marry, an Arab, woman, to, you go down the list, Leopold Sedar Senghor, many of these first presidents who we look up to, Eduardo Mondlane, they were married to white people. Now, if it came down to, all right, who's going to do something in the interest of black people? Well, now they're thinking about, well, what about my white wife? You understand? They've been toned down from whatever may have been in the interest of black people. And now they're thinking about, well, what about the interests of my, white wife? You understand?
Yeah.
So, that's really when he says, oh, she didn't colonize anyone, the first person she colonized, if nobody else, is Exhibit A, he himself, you understand? And what she's done is actually exacerbated the self-hatred that's been implanted into all of us, you understand? Because many of us, we grew up with cartoons and the heroes, right? The Supermans, the Spider-Mans, all these white people we've been taught to idolize. What does that do? It makes you want to be like them. Even especially the imaginary white boy on the stick is the main thing. And there's a movie called Sankofaba Nana Haile Gerima, and in it there's a character named Joe, who he himself is a second tier victim of bedroom colonialism, meaning that he is what they refer to as a mulatto. Here in Ghana they say half caste.
Half caste, okay.
Now, he always sees this image of Mary, this white Mary, and there's a black woman who loves him, who's basically throwing herself at him, and he doesn't want her. He doesn't want anyone who looks like his black mother. He wants the image of Mary. And, he's looking at this painting. He has this thing, around his neck. Oh, he's looking at you. And then she asks him, what is it, this, Virgin Mary herself that you want? Now, again, even the image of the Mary is coming from the original image of Osset, which was, the image of a black woman, which is actually even just a metaphor for the star Sirius, you understand? So when they talk about Asar, that's the father, and that is represented by the constellation of Orion. You have Sopdet, which is, or Sahu as it was called in classical Kemet. Then you have those that point to Sopdet in a line, and then those point to Heru, which is the sun. And that line, it points to exactly where the sun will rise in the southeast at the time of the winter solstice. So that's where the idea of the birth of, the Savior on December 25th comes from, is because that line points you exactly to where the sun rises on December 25th after being dead, metaphorically, down at its lowest point for 3 days, and then it rises up. So these are things that people, of course, aren't taught. They're taught that these are real people. But if you actually know that story well, then you actually know a lot about astronomy. It's something you can view, with your own eyes every December 25th, right? But, to come back, that was the original image, was of Osset represented as a black woman. But then they decided, you had Pope Alexander, who decided that, we need to have images of white people. Why are we praying to all these images of black people? Now, they didn't eradicate them, because if you go to the Vatican, you can find images of black Madonna, that's black Mary, and black, so-called Jesus.
They kept it
It's not even buried. It's everywhere. Like
everywhere,
if you go to Western Eurasia, if you go to places like Poland, if you go to Italy, if you go to France, you can barely go 2 feet without stumbling over an image of Black Mary and Black Jesus. And if your viewers even do a search for Pope, and Black Mary, they'll find hundreds and hundreds of images of the Pope himself, kneeling down, kissing the feet of Black Mary and Black Jesus. All these types of things. It's just not readily apparent to us, because when they came here, they came to colonize us, they came to enslave us, they came to rape, murder, pillage, and plunder. So, when they came, they left all the black images, and they decided to bring the images, that were commissioned, painted by Michelangelo and so forth and so on. Those are the ones that they brought here. The black images are still there, right? They're not buried anywhere. They're out in public, they're in churches. Some of the most famous cathedrals will have these images, but they're not, known to us here, because they were coming here not to save your soul. They were coming here to steal your people. They were coming here to steal your resources, all of those types of things.
Interesting. Interesting. This is deep information that you're giving me, and I really appreciate it. I've met, you yourself, you are in Ghana now.
Yeah.
Here's your home, you would say. I've met few, even down in my comment section, some African Americans or even diasporans in general.
That's a misnomer. That's a misnomer and an oxymoron.
Yeah, and they don't want to come to Africa. They don't want to come to Ghana because of the stereotype. Yeah. Like, I don't want to associate myself to Africa because it's not cool. And they're willing to live in New York in their, one cubicle apartment for the rest of their life and their children's life without seeing that there's abundance here. Basically, they don't love themselves. What would you say to people like that, and why they're thinking, like how they're thinking?
They think whatever their white enemies tell them to think, especially if they're exposed to white cesspoolian media. So, essentially they'll have algorithms that will tell them to start saying certain things, and then they start saying them. And in the act, as to quote Nana Kwame Ture says, in the act of reacting, they think that they're thinking. when really they're just responding to external stimuli. So, you know, just to that exact same point, an example would be even the name that they respond to. So how can you have an African American? You understand? It would be like saying dry water, right? It would be like saying, like it's something that doesn't even make sense. And I'll quote again Baba Omoale on the point. He says that, you know, you don't get, you know, cracked in the head because you are any of these groups that we call ourselves. We mentioned like the Mason and the Elks and all these clubs and sororities, fraternities, so forth. He said it's because you're black. And he says, and surely isn't because you're an American. That's not why, you know, you don't catch no hell because of this, because of that. Because if you were an American, you wouldn't catch no hell. But meanwhile, we see that we're still, you know, on the receiving end of the Philando Castiles, of the Oscar Grants, of the, you know, Abner Luimas, of, you know, all of these things, whether it's mutilation, whether it's hanging, whether it's being shot down in the street, you know, you name it, that, you know, this is still going on. That if you are really an American, then, you know, what's going on here. But again, once they can get you to respond to a name, you know, and even the name itself is coming from Amerigo Vespucci, so you're naming yourself after an Italian explorer, and it's like, what's really your connection between, you know, yourself and Amerigo Vespucci? There's really, you know, no connection. But if you can get people to change their names, then you can actually get them to start thinking in ways of, okay, well, if I'm a specific type of American, and I'll give you a little bit in terms of the linguistics of English, that English is what's known as a right-headed language. That means that the noun is on the right. Let's say you're reading from left to right, the noun is on the right, and then the modifier, the adjective, is on the left. This means that you can say, here is a purple American, here is a blue American, here is a so forth American, but now what you have is, here is an African type of American. You're still dealing with a type of American, which means that that's now the standard that you're operating on. And now it's like, well, what does this specific type of American do? Well, now you can get these people, because they think that they're Americans, despite the fact that they're getting shot down the street every day, and their children are getting, you know, put into prisons and, you know, doped up with Ritalin, all the things that, you know, we are aware of. But now you can say, oh, well, this type of American goes and fights in the military. This type of American, you know, pays his taxes dutifully. This type of American, because now you're just a specific type of, you know, American. You understand? So this is a thing. And meanwhile, you know, you'll have your enemies who don't suffer from all of these things that we're talking about, but still we're trying to say that we're just a different type of, you know, American. So I think that that's one of the things, that if you can get someone to respond to something that wasn't intended for them, you understand, now you can actually get them to act in ways that are very unnatural. And it's like, you know, this idea of a rat in a Skinner box, right? That you'll have, and, you know, you can look this up, that you'll have these rats that are given specific type of prompts and stimuli, where if I pull this lever, now I get a reward in the form of food. And, you know, if I pull this lever, then, you know, the bottom of the cage that was shocking me previously, it will stop shocking me. And you can literally train rats to do things that no normal rat would ever do. But that's exactly what you have the entire United Snakes, you know, for example, not just the United Snakes, but now that becomes the Skinner box, where now you can get people to respond to stimuli and think that they're actually thinking. And the stimuli is in the form of likes. The stimuli is in the form of views. The stimuli is in the form of subscribers. They can actually reward you for doing things, for making debates about things that aren't even debatable, you understand? And the more controversial it is, then the more likes and views and subscribers and money that they'll give you, that you're literally the rat in the Skinner box, you understand? And Nana Amos Wilson, a noted psychologist, would often make this point, that if you are studying psychology and you're learning about the rats that are being trained in this way, and you don't see how it relates to you directly, that you are the rat in the experiment, then, you know, you've actually missed the point of your psychology class.
I met an African American who said he's indigenous to America, and I should never call him African. Are black people indigenous to America?
So there are two things. If he's saying that he's doesn't want to be associated with Africa, and then two, if he thinks that he's indigenous to America, there are a couple of things that are going on there. One is that you have, you know, people who have come through a system of miseducation where they aren't taught anything about themselves, whether that's, genetically, so forth and so on. And then they also aren't taught history about themselves, or as people would prefer to say, our story, right? Now, to say that this person is American, they're not even thinking about where the word American comes from. Also, there's also a problem with the term Africa and African, because also that's not an indigenous word. That if you look in our own languages, that anytime we're referring to this land, we refer to it as the land of black people, right? So in Chi, an example would be ABIBITUMI, coming from the B, which is the same thing you have in BDA, which is the word for charcoal, and it's referring to the land of black people. If you come to Yoruba, Ila Adulawo, again, you're saying this is the land of black people. If you come to Kikongo, it's called Nsia Bandombe, again referring to the land of black people. When you are using this term African, then you're actually coming etymologically through Latin, and it's a Latin word of obscure origin where there are at least a dozen etymologies that are, given out there, but none of them tells you that this is the land of black people, you understand? Meanwhile, if we're actually using our own languages, if this person is a black person, then he is obviously coming from the land of black people. He's not coming from the land of Amerigo Vespucci or anybody who was there before Amerigo or anybody else, got the name appended to it, you understand? So that's one. So to say American is a misnomer, also to say African is a misnomer. So he actually has an oxymoron where both of those terms have absolutely nothing to do with him. That if he actually knew who he was, he would have a term like Obibini, but it would require him to actually know any language which is indigenous to our own people. If he actually knew who he was, he would have a word like Adulawa, which is literally to say a black person. You would go to classical Kemet, what they refer to as Medunetu, which is the writing system, where a man would be called Kem, which is literally to say black man. Or Set Kemet, which is literally to say black woman. If he actually had his own language, then he would have a word like Nitkunyul, which is Walla for a black person, or Farafin, which is Bambara for a black person, or he would have a word for Ndombe, which is again Kikongo for a black person. He would have Watu Weusi for black people in Kiswahili. He would, and again, even if you look at the Arabs who have colonized a lot of the land of black people, when they say Bilad as-Sudan, they're saying the land of black people. The Greeks who, colonized the land of black people, they'll say Ethiopia, which is literally those who are black in color. So, again, if we're speaking our own languages, and even those who've been exposed to our languages, it's a consensus that this is the land of black people and that he would be referred to as a black person in our own languages. But what he isn't aware of is that, you had in the Stono Rebellion, what's referred to as a Stono Rebellion in South Carolina. Before that time, to a large degree, we were still playing our own drums, and we were playing the drums in order to speak to each other in our own languages. But after the Stono Rebellion was suppressed, this is where they started to institute what they referred to as, slave codes, black codes. You had a series of these that tended to come up after a major rebellion or revolution. And in this, what they decided to do is they decided to ban the playing of the drum and the speaking of the language. So what he is even doing is a manifestation of the history that he's not aware of. That if it wasn't for that event specifically, he would still have his own language where he would be saying a black person. Especially in South Carolina, you had what's called Igbo landing, where they were speaking Igbo. And in Igbo, they would say Ndicioji, which is to refer to those who have black heads, the people who have black heads, or Allah Ndicioji, which is to say the land of those who have black heads, again referring to the black people. But because he's been cut off from his own language, all he has is English, and all he has is American. He's willing to say American. Well, what language is that? You understand? There's another very good lecture by Nana Amos Wilson where he, goes into, what foods do you eat? Now this guy is probably eating pizza. Whose food is pizza? He's probably eating hamburgers. Whose food is that? You understand? Is this the food of our ancestors? And, the answer is clearly no. What clothes do you wear? Are these the clothes? So if you think you're an American, well, what clothes do you need to wear? He's wearing the exact same clothes that the people who enslaved his ancestors, are selling to him. And then they're laughing all the way to the bank because his identity is skewed to the point that, well, if he thinks that he is any type of American, well, now what clothes do Americans wear? Well, they wear the exact clothes that enrich our enemies. If he thinks that, what language does he speak? All of these different areas, what God does he worship? You understand? That, again, all of these different lines, all these different criteria. And even if he says, well, I got out of Christian sanity, well, he's still operating on a Christian sanity type of mindset, because what you're doing is you're actually literally worshiping the people who enslaved you, because you're giving sacrifices to them in the form of your money, in the form of your time, in the form of your energy, in the form of your resources, in the form of your spirit. So rather than building up the land of black people, you're actually, operating as any American would do, which is to continue enriching, the colonial enemy. So to say you're African American, one, is a misnomer, because African isn't the appropriate term. It's anything that refers to the black person, right, in our own languages. And then American also isn't correct, because again, you're naming yourself after Amerigo Vespucci. Is that your granddaddy? No, it's not.
Because your outfit looks very nice, and for people like myself, I wouldn't wear this because as like what people say. I would wear it for occasions and stuff, but traveling, it's just a lot of attention, a lot of questions.
But that's not why.
That's not why?
Well, not entirely, because well, I'm hearing your perspective in terms of the social, but like the social is like growing up your entire life, is that you're seeing people who are wearing white people clothes. That has an impact on you. And even what you're speaking to is that what will people say? It's like all of them people have grown up seeing white people clothes. And again, it's like you have an entire society who their mentality is such that is trained to enrich our enemies. You understand? So like even what you're saying, it's like, how did everyone get to the point where wearing something that's made by your own people is something that's even noteworthy or remarkable or something like this? Meanwhile, it's normal to be wearing jeans and slacks and shoes and trousers, and that's not made by your own people. No one will say anything, to the point where if you're wearing anything made by black people, people will think you must be foreign.
Yeah.
And if you're and if you're wearing something made by non-black people, then people, oh, this is a real Ghanaian. This is just normal Ghanaian, clothes. A Bruniwewu is like the normal thing. So like the one who benefits from that is the one who implanted that in there on an individual level, and it can't be like just happenstance, because what you're speaking
it's all calculated.
It's very much calculated, because the ones who benefit economically, psychologically, socially, and all those areas are the ones who gave us that thought in the first place. But we think we're thinking independently. But let's say someone is coming from Oga, and you have someone coming from Bolgatanga, but they both have the exact same thought. Oh, I can't wear this on any other day. Maybe if I'm going to a function, but like normally I just have to wear some, jeans and t-shirts. And like what's the probability that two people they've never met, they've never had a conversation, but they've all come to the exact same conclusion? There must be something behind that. And if we really start thinking about who's behind it, I always give the quote again by Nana Amos Wilson. It says, if you want to understand any problem, don't think about who suffers from the problem, look at who benefits from the problem. And the ones who benefit from the problem is basically like following the money trail. Those are the ones who most likely gave you that idea in the first place. Now, how did they do that?
TV.
Mainstream. Movies. The cesspool media, what they call social media. All of those things, they always give you images, and you just think, I like this, I click this, I'm following this person, but you're not understanding the psychological impact that it's having, and even on a deeper level, the chemical impact that it's having. It's actually activating certain chemicals. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. I call it the dose. And that's what gamification is based on, that it becomes like almost a game to get more viewers and to get more likes and to get this and to get that. It does something to your ego, and it fills your happy place, and like all of those things that, previously what they would do, and they haven't stopped, but they would bring drugs into the community. They bring in cocaine, they'd bring in heroin, they'd bring in, you name it, all opioids, all these different things. But now they're like, rather than paying the cost to ship these drugs in, let's just operate on the drugs that you already have in your body, to the point that they know if they flash these certain lights and they have these certain color patterns, that's there's a science to this.
Because they already know the chemicals already introduced to your body.
Exactly, and you're addicted to those chemicals. You'll start crying if you don't get that. You start feeling withdrawal if you don't get that chemical rush that's still inside of you. So rather than bringing external drugs to give you that chemical rush, they're operating on the chemicals that are already inside you, and those can be exacerbated through the toxic, things that you take into your body in terms of the fast foods, in terms of the sugars, in terms of the, colas, in terms of, all of these different things, and now exacerbates it, that now you start shaking and twitching, for those types of things. And those are the ones who, again, benefit from it. And those are the ones who created that in the first place. So, people think about so-called colonialism, that the point of colonialism isn't so that they, and you can look at how so-called Europe underdeveloped Africa by Nana Walter Rodney, that the point of so-called colonialism isn't for them to have outposts here on the Gold Coast where they have to have, officers, and they have to pay them, and then they have to do stipends, and they have to, do this in terms of administrative paperwork and so forth. The point isn't that. The point is what's going on now. This is where they actually reap the benefits. So, it's basically better for them to pull back. And now all they get is the money from you all who are on what my father, Nana Kambon, called remote control self-destruct. So now in the, manipulation, and again, you have these different levels of power. There's a good book, Blueprint for Black Power, that goes into this, that the lowest level is force. And oftentimes when you speak about this, they'll say, well, white people don't force you to do this. No one's forcing you to wear that. No one's forcing. And, it's if they actually understood what they're saying, that's very appropriate, because force is the lowest level of power. That's colonialism, where they'll actually, put a gun to your head, shoot you, and now they'll conscript you into World War I or World War II. Or I call it White War I and White War II. That's force. They're literally forcing you to go into the mines and go to the farms, to enrich them. But at our next highest level is coercion. So now they don't have to use force, because as soon as you use force, now the people are going to fight back. But coercion is a threat of force. They'll put everybody, line you up. All right, now you have to go get on this boat. Otherwise, your whole village will be destroyed. All right, that's now coercion. But now above that, now you have influence. So now what I'll just do is go to your ohene or your omahene and then tell him, all right, this is what we need you to do. Bring us 10,000 soldiers, so forth and so on. Otherwise, you'll be destooled, you'll be put on the seashells, blah, blah, whatever it is, right? So now they're using influence over somebody who now has power over other people on different levels. And then you have competent and legitimate authority. This is where now they can get someone to say, oh, well, I'm loyal to the queen, or I'm loyal to the king, because they have competent authority, they have legitimate authority, they're the head of the Anglican, faith, they're this, they're that. So now once they can give you certain titles and so forth, now each higher level of power is able to engender less resistance, right? Force is the most resistance, that's why it's the lowest level. But now competent, I think you should be the leader. Oh, we should listen to you because you're the rightful person. Oh, you have a PhD, or you have this, or you have that. That's now competent and legitimate authority. But the highest level is manipulation. And manipulation doesn't engender any resistance whatsoever, because you think that you're thinking for yourself. So the guy who's marrying a white woman, he doesn't know that the movie that he saw when he was 3 years old,
it's having an effect.
And the TV show that he saw when he was 4, and the action figure that he got when he was 5, and the social media he was looking at last week, and what came up on his news feed, 2 days ago. He doesn't understand the totality of what all of that was put in front of him to do. Is now that I don't want anyone who looks like my mother or my sister or my cousin or anything else. I want who looks just like Wonder Woman. I want who looks just like Superwoman. I want the one who looks like Virgin Mary. Why do you want what you want, right? Again, it comes down to these created tastes and desires, and those benefit the genetic terrorists. Those benefit those who are thinking, you know what? We've been doing a lot of rape and ravishing, pillage and plunder, death and destruction, whether that be the brutish, whether that be the stench, whether that be the Spanish, whoever it is. They're like, at some point in time, and in the United Snakes, they talk about how you'll have a white woman who's in the elevator who's clutching her purse when a black man comes in, because she's thinking that justice may exist in the world. You understand? There's a proverb that says, that translates to one who cuts throats is always scared to lay on his back. So they're very clear that at some point in time, black people should rise up and do something, to them, where Ma'at will be restored. So how do they basically hedge their bets and make sure that the black people, the more rebellious ones, are calmed down? How? All those liberation leaders, Mam Serhanta Job, a leader, a scholar, of, you know, like who's equal to him in terms of physics, anthropology, so forth, that Nana Thomas Sankara, Nana Milkar Cabral, you go down a list of just about every single liberation leader, all of them had some type of white woman. You can even go to like Bob Marley. You name them, most of them. Now, what does that do? Well, let's say that if they ever had the idea that, you know, we should get rid of all the white people from our land, they're going to think twice.
Because their wife is white.
Because their wife is, or we should kick them out of the diamond mines and just possess them entirely as black people, or we should do this. Because, you know, any natural creature that's intelligent will operate on the basis of common ancestry and common descent. That's the only thing that's ever been in play since the beginning of life on Earth. And you find this oftentimes in like herds of zebra. Now, why do zebras come together in herds, right? Well, it's because of common ancestry and common descent that leads to shared interests, right? So they're going to come together on the basis of what they have in common, and they can see it in the phenotype that's coming from the genotype. But because they have common genes, that's the common ancestry, now they know we all look kind of alike. Well, guess what? We're all zebras. So now let's have, you know, zebra interests, and let's move to, you know, where the rains are going to come, and so forth and so on. But the zebras didn't learn that from the killer whales that also do that. And the killer whales didn't do that. They didn't learn that from the lions that also do that. The lions didn't learn that from the ants that also do that. Again, that's the only thing that's ever been in play. And anyone who tells you different is telling you different, most likely if they're black, because they want to marry a white woman or a white man, because they have all these red herrings where they'll say, oh, it's about class analysis. Well, during all the time of class analysis, you know, where was the black head of the communist state? Of an all-white communist state, where's the black head? Because, hey, we're all in the same class. We're all, you know, for the cause of, you know, workers unite and blah, blah. So where's the black head in the Kremlin, right? The white people need to step down because this guy understands, you know, this theory. But where is it, right? But what you have is, you know, black people who are going there and they're trying to marry a white person and they're getting beaten to death, right? Or you have someone who is there and, you know, they're getting called the N-word, and they have these placards that say, let's go out and lynch all the Negroes. This is in the USSR under the communist state. You know, you find this. And I have an article I'm working on that basically goes into how all of these white ideologies are just different versions of white on top, black on the bottom, whatever they're called, right? And I'll come back to the point of common ancestry and common descent is the only thing that's ever been in play since the beginning of life on Earth. But again, the red herring is, if I can get you to think about it's about class, now you're going to start thinking about things that go to the ancestry and the descent of the ones who gave you that ideology in the first place. It helps their survival, and that's the reason why they gave it to you, is to help their survival collectively, whereas you're no longer thinking about what's in the interest of your own people. But, you know, if you look at the United Snakes, that's supposed to be capitalist, right? But capitalist is just white on top, black on the bottom. If you look at Cuba, that's supposed to be socialist, but still you have white on top, black on the bottom. No matter how many black Cubans there are, where's the black? They don't even give you a mulatto head of state, right? Where's the black head of state? Oh, we're all for the same, you know, class analysis, whatever, whatever. And then the same thing for the USSR. So I actually went through a timeline of all of these events that, you know, were going on with the first black students. As soon as the black people were going to the USSR, that's supposed to be a communist state, they're getting lynched, they're getting harassed, they're getting beaten and maimed and so forth and so on, all these slurs. But these are the people who are at the forefront of the, you know, class revolution. So most of the people who I know who are into that type of analysis have white wives. And at the time of the so-called, you know, independence struggles, most of them who are into that type of analysis had white wives, and that's not happenstance. You understand? They're given an analysis, and I often talk about it in terms of the theories, the ideologies are like a dog. So if I have a pet dog and I raise it as a puppy, I'm raising it as a puppy not with the idea that, oh, one day I hope that this puppy will rip my throat out. No one is raising their puppy hoping that one day they hope the puppy just goes rogue and kills my child and, you know, bites my wife's, you know, ear off and whatever. They're thinking you're supposed to serve my interests. Fetch, go, sit, stay. You're supposed to obey me, and that's what ideologies do. They obey their creators. You understand? So if you have a white ideology, there's no part of any white ideology that tells you what to do about white people. And that's not happenstance. It's not, oh, it just happens like that. Every white ideology is designed to protect the creator of the ideology. No one has come up with any white ideology that says, you know what, the point of this ideology is to wipe out white people from your land. Any time you see a white person, this is your ideology I'm giving you, they're not going to give it to you. And there's a quote in the Great Debate by Nana Khalid Muhammad, and it was brought to him, Baba Omowale, Malcolm X, when he went to Mecca, he said that he saw something different. So Nana Khalid Muhammad says, I've been to Mecca, numerous times, and I've encountered racism so thick you could cut it with a butter knife, right? And, he says, and basically what it boils down to is, if it's a capitalist country, then the white capitalists are on top and the black capitalists are on the bottom. If it's a socialist country, then the white socialists are on top, the black socialists are on the bottom. If it's a communist country, then the white communists are on top and the black communists are on the white black communists are on the bottom. He says if it's a class analysis, then the whites are the upper class and the blacks are the lower class. He says if it's a Christian country, then guess what? The white Christians are on top, the black Christians are on the bottom. If it's a Muslim country, then guess what? The white Muslims are on top, the black Muslims are on the bottom. Let me see the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia be a black man, right? That's where you can tell me that, oh, it's a brotherhood, that's all. We're not seeing that, because every religion, every ideology, every theory, every last one of them is the same thing, which is protect us collectively, look out for our survival collectively. Even if we have to make a sacrifice here or there, collectively make sure that this ideology that we're giving puppy food to is never going to rise up and do something, against us, and it never does. Every last one of them is always religion, theory, whatever, white on top, black on the bottom. So now it behooves us as black people to say, well, what are our theories? And then we can actually look into our own writings. Some of our oldest writings, for example, from classical Kemet, were that we are black people, but we didn't call them white people, we called them foreigners. It's a similar thing. Obibini, Obroni is to say foreign. There's not fita in it. If you even want to say fita, the word for white, you actually have to specify Obroni fita, or Obroni fita, because bro is literally referring to the horizon, those who are beyond the horizon, Obro, Ichiri. So again, we have a base of power in the fact that we're all black, but we're not saying that they have a similar base of power, and we're not saying that they're white. We're saying that they're foreign to the land of black people. And it was the exact same thing in classical Kemet. We called ourselves Kemetiu, which translates to black people. And again, the root word for chemistry is coming from that exact same word. But we would call them Amu, and it comes from the root Amu that has a throw stick that's also used as a determinative for foreignness. And in that, it just is saying that they're foreign to the land of black people. Amu, right? That was a term in written Medu Neter that you would have to explain that these are foreigners. And then you had literary texts that talk about don't allow foreigners to come into the land of black people. That if they come in, they bring death and destruction, rape and ravishing, pillage and plunder. So you have, for example, the Lamentations of Ipuwer, which is about that. When they come in, then everything that was right goes awry. The one who had wealth is now poor. The ones who are buried, in elaborate tombs are now thrown away into the river. The river is of blood, like it goes into all these different things. The prophecy of Nefertiti talks about the exact same thing. So you have literary text after literary text that's saying, as black people, we need to keep these foreigners out of the land of black people. That was the narrative. And then actually you have historical documents, such as the autobiography of Yamo, son of Abana, that here you have these non-black people who come in, and the whole narrative is about how we were able to drive them out of the land of black people. So we laid siege here for this many days. I was able to cross the river, and I cut off the hand of one of these enemies, the Amu. I did this, I did that. So he's actually going through like a military diary of what he did on a daily basis, on a battle by battle basis, and so forth and so on. So that's when we're very clear in terms of who we are. But also in Kemet is where we became not clear, because after we were able to drive them out, now we go off into their territory, and then we bring their princes in to be raised up, similar to what happened to Osei as we were talking about, right? So you raise up the princes of your vassal states, and the idea is that once they become the ruler outright, they're going to serve your interests because they were taught by you, so forth and so on. But what ended up happening is that as they came in and we allowed them to marry in, and there's a good book called The Destruction of Black Civilization by Nana Chancellor Williams that goes into how this happened time and time again. you allow them to marry in, they maintain their loyalty to their own people because they know that the only operation that's ever been since the beginning of life on the planet is common ancestry and common descent. You understand? And they can see it through the common phenotype because the phenotype is coming from the shared genotype. Now, the shared genotype for Western Eurasians is SLC24A5.
That's the code?
Yeah, this is talking about the specific gene that's implicated in terms of the lack of melanin.
I see.
You understand? So that is SLC24A5 for the Western Eurasians, and then OCA2 polymorphism for Eastern Eurasians. But it's a case of convergent evolution where both of them come out without melanin, right? So you can find this in different ways. So they're very clear based on the common phenotype who they are and who they are not. Similarly in classical Kemet. So, when you look at Kemet, that's a very similar situation where we're all coming together on the basis of being black people that you have in other cases of people, thousands of years later who never even heard the word Kemet, but they did something similar because they were in a similar type of situation. You understand? So a common context can give rise to a common, situation. So in Kemet, classical Kemet, that's now occupied by the Arabs. Again, all these texts are about keeping them out, keeping them, literally saying this is a wall to, crush the sand-faring Bedouins, right? They're very clear. But again, text after text is talking about this, historical document after historical document is talking about it, but now they've invaded. But look at where they are. They're located literally at the doorstep of where these Amu are, where these foreigners are. It would make sense that those are the people to come up with this idea of let's come together on the basis of what we all have in common against these foreigners. You understand? And you have a similar thing if you look at Nana Jean-Jacques Dessalines' Constitution 1805 in Haiti. You have all these people who are coming from, some are Fon, some are Yoruba, some are Akan, some are coming from wherever, Congo, they're coming from Senegal, they're coming from, you name it, all types of different places. But at that point, they say, we're all les noirs, les nègres, we're all the blacks. You understand? How do we come to that? Because we have common non-black enemies, so we unite on the basis of what we have in common, which is the common blackness. So I have a book called The Construction of Black Civilization that goes into this. In the case of classical Kemet, looking at primary source documents, some of which I've been mentioning. You have a similar thing in the United States. We have a Black Power movement. The people in the Black Power movement, they're not necessarily reading text from Kemet to know, oh, well, this is how they did it. Oh, there was this text, a literary text, is this a historical text? Let's operate on the basis of those texts. But they know, look, we have common non-black enemies. Let's come together on the basis of common ancestry. That's a shared genotype. And then the common, descent. Those are what lead to our common interests. So now they have, Black Power. You have Nana Paul Bogle, who had this clarion call in Jamaica during chattel enslavement, cleave to the black. Now you had all kind of people who are being shipped to Jamaica who are calling themselves a billion different things. But how did they come to this point of, we're all black people? They came to it the same way that the zebras came to it. They came to it the same way gazelles came to it. They came to it the same way that bison came to it, the same way that wolves came to it, the same way that Harris hawks who hunt in packs came to it, the same way dolphins came to it. Every intelligent creature on the entire planet Earth comes to that same conclusion, except for black people who have been trained by their colonial enemies. We operate differently. Another group, and I think I mentioned this in the interview that you were referring to, is these what they call kidnapper ants or slave catching ants, right? Well, the way that they do it is through a similar process of miseducation where they'll steal the larvae and then they'll take the larvae back to their nest and then they'll coat them in pheromones. That's the equivalent of miseducation. So now these ants, when they come of age, they think that they're red ants, right? But really they're black ants, and they start operating on the basis of, what's in the interest of the red ants to the detriment of their own people. Now, isn't that your guy in the comment section?
Yeah. I actually met him in person.
Oh, yeah.
So if he's watching this, he will know. Let's speak. You made mention about Freemason. You made mention about Freemason in your statement. And you'd realize that even though we are an independent nation, as a black nation in this country that we are, most of our leaders are joined to that group.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Do you want to share your opinion on that? Why do you think that is? And is Freemason in our best interest as black people? Or why our chiefs, some of our kings are Freemasons?
And presidents.
And presidents, yes. Ex-presidents. And
Yeah,
presidents.
ex-presidents, yeah. So it's not different from what we were just discussing in terms of, like, all these things may look like different things, but really they're one thing, right? And it comes down to, you have spider webs and you have the spider, right? So Freemasonry is a spider web. It's a problem, but it's not the problem. The problem is the same one who created all the other problems that we're mentioning. You understand? So if we look at the Freemasonry, for example, that's just like how the red ants will coat the black larvae with pheromones to make it now think that it's a red ant, and it starts acting in ways that are, very deleterious to ants. There's another case that's, also related to ants. I look at a lot of animal documentaries. So this one is cordyceps. Now, what is cordyceps? Cordyceps is a type of fungus, and what happens is the spores will land on an ant, and what it does is it starts to go into the exoskeleton of the ant, where it starts to take over, the nervous system of the ants. It starts, jerking around and behaving quite un-ant-like ways, and then it separates itself from the group, right? This is a group that has common ancestry and common descent, but now it's behaving in the interest of what has been implanted into it. So what does it do? It starts to go and it tries to find a tree where the tree has just enough, shade. It has just the right humidity, not too much sunlight, not too little sunlight. It has just the right conditions, not for an ant to live, but for the fungus that's taken over its body to live. And what it does is that, its mandibles, its pincers, it sinks them into the tree and it dies. And then what happens is that out of the, base of its neck comes, this protrusion that, starts to balloon up, and then it releases more spores, and then that continues again. And literally you can have colonies of hundreds of thousands or millions of ants that can be wiped out from this. Well, what is Freemasonry? Freemasonry is one of those spores, because it will get into you, and now you start behaving in ways that are in the interest of your enemies, which is a fungus that's been implanted into you in the first place. But it's not unique in that way. It's a similar thing for all the ideologies we've been mentioning, whether it's capitalism, communism, socialism, whether it's Christian sanity, whether it's Islam, whether it's, all of those things have in common that they are the spider web and not the spider, right? And what does the spider web do? The spider web is supposed to serve the interests of the spider who wove the web in the first place. And if we just deal with Freemasonry on its own, then we'll think, well, if we can get rid of Freemasonry, then we're cool. No, because you still have Oxford curriculum. Oh, well, if we can just get rid of Oxford and Cambridge curriculum, then we're cool. No, because you still have Christian sanity. Well, if we can just get rid of Christian sanity, then we're cool. No, because you still have Islam or Islam. If we can just get rid of that one, then we're cool. No, because you have Facebook. Well, if we can get rid of Facebook, then we're cool. No, because you have TikTok. Well, if we can get rid of TikTok, then we're cool. No, because you have YouTube. No, if you can get rid of YouTube, then we're cool. No, because they have Instaful. Well, we can get rid of Instaful, then we're cool. No, because we have Nitwitter. Well, if we can get rid of Nitwitter, then we're cool. And it's like, no.
It never ends. So where do we go to?
Because they have Burger King, because they have the movie theater. So all of those are spider webs. So, again, to extend the analogy, it's a layered analogy I've been giving you, so I hope your people are following along. So to extend the analogy, what can you do about a spider? Well, there are certain spiders that hunt other spiders, right? Very, very intelligent spider hunting spiders. So what they do is that they face the spider head on, and they have a variety of ways that they do so. There are these jumping spiders that do this. And, sometimes they'll look at where the spider is in the web, the specific type of spider it is. Does that spider have good vision, so forth and so on. And what they'll do is that they'll perch atop of the web, and then they'll, have just a little bit of the silk that they weave, and they'll wait till they get close. Then they jump on the top of it, sink the pincers in, and then they kill the big spider, right? Another time what they'll do is that they'll, play the spider web like it's a guitar, and it simulates, prey that's been caught in the spider web. And when the big spider starts coming along, so this is a tiny spider compared to the big spider, it will say, oh, I caught something, great. And they'll start coming closer, and guess what? You're the prey, right? So, there are different strategies that we can say, okay, if that spider can be defeated by another spider that's more intelligent, then, we can perhaps do something along those ways. Another thing that you could do is isolate that spider and starve that spider to death. That's what the beginning of the interview was talking about. If we're saying that we're not wearing their clothes anymore, you know, it was expecting prey to come into its web, but it's starting to get hungry. It says, oh, there are no flies today. Oh, there are no mosquitoes today. Oh, no grasshoppers today. Oh, I'm starting to feel hungry. And guess what? What would have been going into the belly of the spider is now being used for our own interests, right? All of the resources, our time, our energy, our resources, our money, and our spirit that were being caught in the spider web called communism or Marxism or capitalism or socialism. All of those isms are just white ideologies that all mean one thing: white on top, black on the bottom. They all mean white survival. They all mean black genocide. You understand? So it's very important for us to keep in mind that all these red herrings, and then those who, you know, there are people who are black on the outside who are the main ones who are trying to get us into all of these ideologies. Any ideology that's not about shared genotype, shared descent, and shared phenotype as shared interests, all of those are what I call AIM, aggressive ideological mimicry. Now, what is aggressive mimicry? So you can look at, you know, for example, there are these fireflies in Pennsylvania. You have a bigger type of firefly and a smaller type of firefly. And, you know, what do they do? What the female of the bigger type of firefly does is that she mimics the lighting pattern of the smaller firefly, to the point that the male that has what are called these chemicals, lusobuffogens, that, you know, keep their predators away, that what it does is that it intentionally simulates the light so that the male thinks, oh, I'm coming to my wife, but guess what? No, you're coming to dinner, and guess what? You're on the plate, right? So it will capture it, it will, you know, eat it, and then it sucks in all these chemicals, the lusobuffogens, and it's able to, you know, enjoy itself, right? That's aggressive mimicry. Another example is you have these spotted predatory katydids, and what they do is that they, you know, mimic the wing flicks of female cicadas. So the male cicada, this is in Australia, the male cicada will come closer and closer, and it thinks it's coming to its wife, but guess what? It's coming to the spotted predatory katydid. It looks like a real big grasshopper or something like that. Once it comes closer, guess what? I invited you over for dinner, and guess who's the main course? You. And that's what all of these aggressive ideological mimics do. You have mimic octopi that do, you know, similar things. They'll mimic something that looks like it's benign, or it looks like it's food, or it looks like it's a mate. It looks like it's something that you want to come closer to. And what is that but, you know, cesspool media? It looks like something you want to get more likes, you want to get more subscribers. You don't want to be on a black platform, you see. You want to be on this because you get the dose, the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So, you know, that's what you're going to go to. But once you come in there, you know, it's like the black content that's on these white platforms is what's luring them in, right? So this is the aggressive mimicry. It's luring them in, and it's not telling them, no, this isn't where you're supposed to be. You know, that's really a firefly. That's really a katydid. That's really this. That's really that. You have also in the deep sea these anglerfish, and what do? They call them anglerfish because there's this modified dorsal fin that looks like a protrusion that comes out in front of its mouth, basically, and
like a big forehead.
No, it looks like a fishing pole, right? Okay. So it comes out like this, and then it extends down, and there's a light at the end that's caused by these basically light-producing bacteria. And what it does is that in the deep sea, it's very dark, right? So, you know, they use light. You have lots of creatures down there that use light for communication and finding prey and so forth. But, you know, you'll have, let's say, a squid that comes close to it, and it thinks, oh, wow, this looks like it's going to be a good meal, a nice tiny little size. And it comes closer, and guess what?
Finding the fish.
Right? And that's what the black people who tell us to have class analysis are. Because that's not about shared ancestry. It's not about shared descent. Literally, you could be in one class one year, and then you can be in another class next year, right? So what are you doing? You know, the ones who tell us, oh, we need to have intersectionality, right? These are the terms that are there on white media. Intersection. Now, let's say you're on a highway to ABIBITUMI, Black Liberation. Well, how can you ever get to your destination when every 2 feet you have an intersection? That's the reason why that's a trending thing. Hashtag intersectionality, hashtag this. Because you're trying to get somewhere, but you're never going to get to your destination because guess what? Here's another stoplight. Here's another stoplight. Here's another intersection. Here's another intersection. I guess we never get to Black liberation. I guess we never get to look out for our shared interests. We never get to look out for our shared children. Matter of fact, this intersection, they tell me we shouldn't even have children. So rather than doing the eugenics that they were doing before, rather than doing the, you know, birth control they did before, rather than putting HIV and AIDS into the clinics in Umzansi that they did before, rather than, or not rather than, in addition to, I should say, all the different aspects of genocide that they've been doing before. Now, at this intersection, it's telling you you shouldn't even do that in the first place. You know, just so these are some of the things that we're dealing with. And, you know, to round things up, we have the ABIBITUMI conference, and really it's about the models, the living models that we have basically put into place here in the land of black people. And it's a meeting of the minds, a grand meeting of the minds. Again, it's dedicated to Nana Kamal Kambon. We have a documentary about him coming out. You can get to that by abibitumi.com/quiet warrior. There are opportunities for people to become producers with that. I'd like to invite all of you off of the white platforms that I've been speaking out against and come to ABIBITUMI. You can download the app, and it's an all black space. Just like where you are right now, physically is an all black space. That digitally is also an all black space, unapologetically so.
And you said something that white people are not allowed here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the land of black people. We're actually bringing Kemet back into reality, because back in classical Kemet, they would mention these are the walls of the ruler in order to, you know, trample the sand-faring Bedouins, right? That, you know, we have walls here to make sure that at least one place on the entire continent that we refer to as a Bibi mine is actually a Bibi mine. This is really the land of black people. Everywhere else they can go to and they can say, oh, there are diamonds here. You all have to, you know, get out of here, right? You're asking me about Nyami Nyami, right? Here you have a case of, you know, a dam that was built in, you know, 57, 58. And, you know, land was confiscated by the indigenous people. That was the Tonga people there. This is what they refer to as Northern Rhodesia. And then you had Southern Rhodesia at that point in time. So Northern Rhodesia, this is what's now Zambia. You have the Zambezi River. So in the Zambezi River, you had a divinity called Nyami Nyami. And the Tonga people, you know, they lived there, you know, peacefully, so forth and so on. But here came this grand scheme that they were going to put a dam on the Zambezi River. And, you know, people saying, you know, that's not going to work. But they literally uprooted those people, drove them out from their homes. You know, the water level is going to rise, as what happens in all of the cases of the dams. But the people were like, you know, Nyami Nyami is not going to allow this to happen. So what ended up happening is they started construction. They tore down, you know, thousands and thousands of trees that were, you know, hundreds of years old, so forth. But eventually what happened was that, you know, a huge flood happened, right? Where it washed away the heavy machinery, it washed away all the things that were done. And they were like, what in the world is happening? Because this has never happened before. So they, you know, brought in climatologists and so forth and so on. And, you know, they calculated that a flood like this that happened in 57, I believe it was, that is only going to happen once every 1,000 years. It can never happen again. So you're clear to start work on the dam again. Guess what happened in 1958?
Again.
A flood of even bigger proportion than what happened in 57. And the people like, we told you it's Nyami Nyami.
Just a year.
Yeah. 58, 57, 58. They're like, we told you that Nyami Nyami doesn't like what you're doing because you're separating him from his wife by putting the dam on this side and so forth and so on. So, you know, they don't believe what's going on, but literally they're dealing with the effects of something that's not supposed to ever happen. But if it does happen, it's not supposed to happen for another 1,000 years. And this time it's bigger than what happened last time. So, you know, they had, you know, an access bridge that was washed away, you know, the dam construction and so forth. All these things were washed away. And some of these, you know, white people, so-called white people, what I would call Amu, they died, right? And their bodies were washed away, and their relatives were coming to try to claim the bodies. And they were like, you know, they had to go to the Tonga people, and they asked the elders, okay, well, they know the river better than anyone, the flow, where could the current have taken the bodies and so forth. And the people said, you have to appease Nyami Nyami. Nyami Nyami doesn't like what you said, like we told you. So you have to sacrifice a calf. Once you do so, then the bodies will appear exactly where, you know, the calf is sacrifice. So they're like, all right, we're exasperated. We don't know what to do. Maybe whatever. So they do the sacrifice. Guess what happens the next morning?
They showed up.
The bodies are in the exact same place where they, you know, the calf was. Now you could say, okay, well, maybe the people just put the body, they knew where it was. They just brought the bodies because the people didn't cause the flood, right? They didn't bring the rains or something. But they're saying this is literally, you know, what happens. So, you know, eventually by 1960, they were able, you know, they did the sacrifice to appease Nyami Nyami. But the people were like, he's still not satisfied. And every so often you have these tremors that occur, and they say that's Nyami Nyami trying to get to his wife. Now, the scientists say it's because of the weight of the water, pushing down the Earth's crust, because of the dam, you have, so forth and so on. But, that's interesting. So this is Nyami Nyami right here. The people of the Zambezi will know much about Nyami Nyami, but this is a carving. It was actually done not in Zambia, but it was done right here in Ghana.
Interesting.
But it's on the basis of, the stems that you have there. So we added the different elements that you find in art here in Ghana, to it as well.
I like it.
Yeah, thank you. It likes you back.
Yeah. Even your, is that bones or that's cowries and what?
This is coral. Coral. So if you look at coral reefs that are in the ocean, then this is the coral that comes from these. The rest are cowries. This one is bone. This is the sword.
Oh, that's a real sword.
Yeah, it's a real sword.
Interesting.
I also teach asakon, which is capoeira, and that is coming originally from Angola, where they used to call it Ngolo. It's more famously practiced now in Brazil, which is where the people of Angola were taken by the Portuguese. So yeah. So, just to come back, I mentioned some of the solutions that we have. So in terms of helping people to repatriate, we have a service called repatriatetogana.com, repatriatetogana, repatriatetogana.com. And with that, we assist people in actually acquiring land, acquiring citizenship. We assist people who are interested in, vehicle acquisition, so forth and so on. So all of that, is here to Repatriate to Ghana. We have the Sankofa journey that's coming up in September for those who are interested. Don't go to the fake ones. A lot of people are using aggressive ideological mimicry. They put fake ones up on Crackerbook and so forth and so on. The real one is only on sankofajourney.com, sankofajourney.com. Go to ABIBITUMI. You can download the app. You can also go to the website that has the information. The documentary is also coming out. So anyone who's looking at it, it's not enough for you to be a fan of mine on YouTube. I remember one time someone said, oh, I would die for Dr. Kambon. I love him so much. I don't want you to do any of those things. All I want you to do is actually be about what you say about the black content that you love. You need to actually support the black institutions that are actually building the land of black people. And this is our building. If we say we're interested in building ABIBIMIND, the land of black people, well, this is our building. We're showing improving. If, I'm saying that we need to support our own, well, this is how I'm supporting our own. The Kantanka is supporting our own. The Marathon is supporting our own. Everything that we do here is about supporting our own. And, really it's what I refer to as functional hatred. Now, what is that? That's like how the Chinese hate the Japanese. They're all the Asian tigers, but they remember the rape of Nanking. You understand? And I know you spent some time in China, so you know what I'm talking about. So the Chinese, they could have just said, let's just buy Sony. Let's just buy Kawasaki. Let's just buy all these big Japanese brands, which were the first ones to come out in the 80s. But they said, no, I don't want what's Japanese. I want my own. And interestingly, every free people, every smart, intelligent people, they do that. They say, all right, well, the head of state of Italy is going to drive a Lancia Thesis. The head of state of Germany is going to drive a BMW or a Mercedes. The head of state of the UKKK is going to, drive a Bentley. The head of state of United States is going to drive a Cadillac. The United States, the head of state of the Stench, who people call the French, he's going to drive a Renault. The head of state of China is going to drive a Honki. The head of state of Japan is going to drive a one-off Toyota Century. Any people who are intelligent are going to do that. But what do? We say, oh, when can we get the new shipment of Toyotas in? You understand?
The new Benz and etc.
Exactly. That's because we're not intelligent. Not because we don't want to be intelligent, but because those pheromones have gotten on us. And
they said Ghana is one of the African countries with the lowest IQ. We are on the 10th on the list.
Well, even the idea of intelligence quotient doesn't really even measure your intelligence. It measures your exposure to white things. So, for example, you can have an IQ test where, let's say you have black people in the United States, and what we refer to a particular type of seat as is a couch. Well, white people, so-called white people, refer to it as a sofa. So on the IQ test, it says, oh, go find something behind the sofa, and the black children are like, what is that? Because in their environment, they'll say couch. But there are a lot of things in the black environment that if the test was based on that, no white people will know what we're talking about. You understand? So they would rank very low on the BQ test, the black quotient test. You see what I'm saying? So the IQ test is another spider web because it's designed to have white on top and black on the bottom. So it basically measures your exposure to specific vocabulary items, to specific things that once you're routed in that, now you can be the head of the bank. Now you can be the head of the university. Now you can do those things. But the test is intentionally done in such a way that it favors those from that particular background.
What do you think about the education system here? Because you are a teacher, you are a lecturer.
There's no education system here. There's a miseducation system here.
There's a miseducation system.
We're yet to have an education system here. You have some people who are doing their best to try to educate, right? So I don't want to throw shade on any individuals who are doing their best, but there's no system. When you say system, it means the different parts of the thing work together in order to accomplish a type of goal. So there's no education system. There's a miseducation system here. Why do I say that? Because I teach a course called Intro to African Studies. And on the very first day, class after class, I've been at the University of Ghana for 10 years this year. So I'm actually on sabbatical now because I've served my 10 years of duty. But anytime I have students come to the class, I'll ask them a question. What's the first thing you think of when you think of quote unquote Africa? And all of them say poverty, corruption, disease, AIDS. You know, they'll go down a list of everything. And I say, and this is without fail, like I can do this to any class every single year. And these are the best and the brightest who have entered the university, the premier university in Ghana, right? Now, I say, I'm surprised that you don't mention mathematics, because the oldest mathematical instrument on the history of the entire planet Earth, which shows evidence of prime numbers, multiplication, division, is from the bone of a baboon, because baboons were associated with mathematics, because they bark at the moon, right? So the idea is that because the moon is associated with the counting and cycles of, the menses and so forth and so on, this is why you need to count, you need to learn how to count, and this is the origin of mathematics. And the idea is that the first mathematicians were the women who needed to know, when should I get pregnant? Because we know that at this time, this is where the harvest is coming, you understand? So they need to do the calculation, otherwise their children are going to be born during the dry season, there's nothing to eat, and they're going to die. So they need to calculate that. So they use the animal that's most associated with the moon in order to do that. So, again, I mentioned the example of, these kidnapper ants, right? What do they do? But they put a certain type of pheromone on the black ant. So it's now serving the interests of the red ants that kidnapped them in the first place. And that's what the miseducation system does. So again, to, come back to my example, I'll mention that and I'll say, I'm surprised that you don't mention that we invented writing. And then they're looking dumbfounded, like, what do you mean we invented writing? If not for the brutish, we'd be swinging in trees as monkeys. And so, like, I've had a student actually say that to me verbatim, word for word. And I mentioned to them, so according to the research of a noted archaeologist, Gunther Dreyer, the oldest bone and ivory tags, which are the oldest examples of writing, which predate that of Mesopotamia by some 200 years, are found in Kemet, the land of black people. They've never heard of that. And then, I just go down the list of all these different things, and they've never heard of them. And I start asking them, well, who do you know? And, I'll ask them, have you ever heard of Einstein? Every hand goes up. And I ask them, do you know the name Imhotep? No hands. These are all black students. They're all continental. They're all Ghanaian. And I'll say that's the world's first multi-genius who's responsible for the architecture of the first monumental stone structure in the form of the step pyramid at Saqqara. They've never heard of him. And then also he was a noted physician, to the point that Hippocrates later on, thousands of years after he was alive, worshipped Imhotep as a deity. Now you take the Hippocratic oath, but you don't know that Hippocrates worshipped Imhotep in the form of Asclepius, as the Greeks referred to him. I start mentioning, okay, have you heard of Queen Victoria? Every hand goes up. And I asked them, have you ever heard of Sat Ra Sobek Neferu Ra? And they think I sneezed. They don't know what I'm talking about. And I say, this is the, first outright female ruler of a nation state in the history of the entire planet Earth. They'd never heard of her, much less have they heard of the, regents who existed prior to this. And, I can go down a list of literally 100 black people. They've never heard of a single one. And then I mentioned 100 random white people. They know all of them. I say, have you ever heard of Shakespeare? Every hand goes up. And then I say, have you ever heard of Imahu Ptahhotep? Never. I say, this is the author of the oldest book in the history of the planet Earth. That objectively speaking, I think that's pretty important for anyone to know, right?
How important, even that is important, but how important it is for our diasporans to come back home and you know, find their heritage and contribute, you know, come and educate like what you've done? How important it is for our own survival as Black people?
It is very important to the degree that those diasporans, you know, Nana Marcus Garvey said that not everyone who is in the diaspora, to use that term, is good there in the diaspora. So when they come here to the continent, there'll also be no good here, because you have those who are coming here who are also doing aggressive ideological mimicry. You have those who are coming here who are not assisting in terms of helping us really understand who we are as Black people. They're actually doing the same thing in terms of aggressive ideological mimicry of saying we need to follow this and follow that white ideology, that white theory, that so forth and so on, because literally this isn't a problem that's unique to the continent. You know, those in the United States, those in Brazil, those in all these places, in Jamaica, they get it just as bad as anyone else. There's just something that happens, especially when we don't have a specific type of tribalism where we are able to see that we're all Black people. But that's the reason why cesspool media is there, is to make us see ourselves as separate from all Black people. So the highest stage that we can be at, if we're speaking English, is to say Black power and we're all about being Black. It dissipates when we start to say we're African American, which is why white people love that term, because now you're just a specific type of American. They love for us to be Ghanaians and Jamaicans and Nigerians and South Africans and whatever. Not rather than Akan, rather than ABIBITUMI, which is in the Akan language, but it's to say we're all Black people. Because if we actually operated on the basis of we're all Black people, well, now they can't play, you know, pit the Akans versus the Eves.
Okay, so yeah, that's true.
You understand? If you can be Akan, then you can be pitted against the Eves, which means that the what they call the gun slave cycle. I give you guns, I give the Eves guns. You don't have to pay me back in cash, pay me back in your enemies. Then they tell the Eves, okay, here are some guns for you too. Danish muskets and, you know, fusiliers.
I like that.
You don't have to pay me back in cash, pay me back in your enemies. So now you are, in your mind, I'm Akan, they're Eves, I'm just gonna go. And then the ones who sold you the guns, they laugh all the way to the bank because they know how much they're gonna get on the other side from the people who are going to be working the farms and, you know, bringing the sugar to make the rum, then to bring the rum here to trade for the people who are your enemies, by the way. So they like to say, oh, you know, we're trading our brothers and selling our brothers and so forth. Well, one is kidnapping that's happening. You know, they like to put it in those types of terms, but it's actually kidnapping against those people's will. And then more so, it's manipulation. Because you don't understand that if we really operated like how we did in classical Kemet for a good 2,000 years, right? We also in Kemet, that was a downfall of Kemet. We started to operate on, let's let these, you know, Amu princes come in. Let's let these Hittite princesses come in and marry in. That's the beginning of the destruction of your civilization. And even before that, let's let the Hyksos settle, right? So again, I'd like to mention that those who should come, when we have Repatriate to Ghana, again, that's the number 2GH, or the full URL, repatriatetoghana.com, is really for those Black people who are going to be of use to the Black race, right? When we have Sankofa Journey, which is coming up, again, sankofajourney.com. Don't go to any of the fake Sankofa Journeys. A lot of people are using it, but none of them are the 26-year-old Sankofa Journey. Those are like the 6-month-old Sankofa Journey, where they just realized that they were whatever themselves. So that's sankofajourney.com. Come to ABIBITUMI.com. Check out the documentary of my father, Quiet Warrior. That's his name, Kamau, in the Kikuyu language. Quiet Warrior, that's abibitumi.com/Quiet Warrior. There are a lot of solutions that we're operating off of. So the things that I'm saying, some of them may seem dire. Oh, we don't know much about our history. We don't know much about that. But that's what ABIBITUMI is a solution for. Oh, we're, you know, cut off from our roots, our heritage. That's what Sankofa Journey and Repatriate to Ghana are for. So, you know, I think I'll close out on that note. I hope it's been beneficial, and I hope people will do more than just, oh, I raised my consciousness. Raise your behavior and go to Black platforms, because that's what we need to build Black institutions, rather than using Black content to build the institutions of our enemies.
I like that. I like that. If you have a final message to the people, what would that final message be? That final message is that the most important thing about classical Kemet is that it means the land of Black people, which is why right now on YouTube you have a lot of non-Black people. They have those who are Black on the outside who are trying to tell you
Kemet just means that the soil is black. Okay, does Abibi mine also mean that the soil is black? Does Ile Adulawa also mean that the soil is black? Does Farafina also mean that the soil is black? Does Real Nitkonyul also mean that the soil is black? Does Ala Ndicog also mean that the soil is black? Does Nsia Bandombe also mean that the soil is black? Does Ethiopia also mean that the soil is black? Does Bilara Sudan also mean that? So it's consensus that is referring to the black people, and this is the land of black people. But a lot of these aggressive ideological mimics are trying to lie to us, because the most important thing for us to realize is to use terms and actually have a concept that means black people that excludes that which is not in our constituency in question. If we use the term African, it includes everyone, which is why the African Union is there, and we're sitting there with the Arabs who are still enslaving us right now. If we use terms like American, then you're there with those who are bombing, you know, the continent, because that's what Americans do, right? And they use the money from your trip to McDonald's in order to bomb Sudan. You understand?
Yeah.
But as soon as we realize that we're all ABIBI4 and we start operating on that basis, now all these aggressive ideological mimics, they have to sit down. Their YouTube channels are no longer going to get views, because the controversy of black people who are talking against black people, that's not what we're in for anymore. So, you know, if there's anything, ABIBITUMI translates to black power, and Abibi Fahundia translates to black liberation. So black power is the methodology. Black liberation is the destination, the end game. And what does the end game do? The end game is that we are not just, sovereign. Sovereignty is not the end game, because sovereignty just means that, we're allowed to stay on our nation, and, you know, they just leave us alone, right? We can control the inner workings of our nation. What real Abibi Fahundia is that they're not even there to do that in the first place. So we're going for ABIBITUMI, that's the ABIBITUMI conference, and then Abibi Fahundia, which is total black liberation.
I like that. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you too.
I still have like so many questions I actually want to ask you, but because there's so much knowledge coming, and I'm a very curious person. I'm enjoying it. Guys, what I want you to do is comment down. I need 10 people. If you want a part 2, comment down we want part 2, and then I'll beg him for another time so we can sit down and have a dialogue again. Comment down what question you wish you would ask him that I didn't. Comment down below. The next time, hopefully, I can be able to ask him. And every link is going to be in the description for you to find his platform, his conferences, that you might meet 10, 20 other people just like him with this same similar mindset that is going to free out people. So feel free.
And last thing, I won't respond to any of the comments there on YouTube, but what I'll do is I'll import the video into ABIBITUMITV.com. And there, that's where I have conversations. So all the people who are like, well, what does he think about that? Or, this, that, that if you are actually interested in what I have to say or so forth and so on, you can go to ABIBITUMITV.com, and I respond to every comment that I get on ABIBITUMI TV.
Also, I'm going to put it on the screen, and also the link to that in the description so you can check it out. And if it's your first time here, please don't forget to like the video, share to friends and family so they can benefit too. Comment down below. Let's get the engagement going. Go to ABIBITUMI TV and also comment down on the video there. And thank you so much for watching. It's been amazing. Without further ado, let's just say bye-bye to the people watching.
ABIBITUMI, Abibi Fahundia.